All right, good morning. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Let's start off with the challenge here. Challenge has one trade on the board, and that is Micron. Micron down a little bit here this morning, about 20 cents last I looked here. 21 cents. And, it's been up 30 cents. It's been down 30 cents. Not a huge move for it. A little disappointing coming off some of the, I guess we can't call it an analyst upgrade here this morning. Anyway, Micron just kind of sitting, hanging out, nowhere close to stop levels or profit levels, and nowhere close to needing to adjust it here. So I'm going to continue to run with Micron for the challenge. Now, there are no new signals on the board here this morning. We do have a couple crossovers. Let me show them to you here. On the bearish side, we have General Electric and we have UPS. Now, UPS had earnings. General Electric is, getting a nice kind of, more organic type of cross down, here with it. But, UPS's was driven by earnings, which are really interesting from a numbers standpoint. I'm very, very interested to see how the stock reacts in the coming days. I think it's an earnings report that could ultimately be very bullish, but it's very it's understandable why they're selling it. When we look at how the numbers look relative to other stocks, that have reported here so far, certainly coming off of its lows. Very interesting report, and I got to go through the conference call and everything else. And you'll notice FedEx not reacting too much to UPS. I think that's very, very interesting. Has some significance, but I do want to go through the report before commenting too much here about it. So those are the downside crossovers, but neither even close to a signal here. And then on the upside, we have Procter and Gamble, who reported earnings and gapping up here on those earnings. And then we have Vale, which does have a chance of triggering here today. So we'll see how that how that goes. If it does trigger, I might go get into it with a little bit of the cash that is left and do a little different type of an option play with it, we'll see kind of how that plays out here going into the close of the market today. With everything else, we have stocks like Disney that have kind of bled all week. Small gap up here this morning. In my note this morning, I mentioned we're not going to see the financials lead the market today, at least most likely. They're not going to have that big leadership role. And so far, they haven't. And one of the reasons I said that is because bonds were up, right? The TLT was bouncing a little bit, and we tend to not see banks lead when the TLT bounces, right? It doesn't mean banks have to tank or anything else, but we're likely not to see them lead. So who's leading today? And to me, this is very interesting to see because, who leads today probably leads going forward. And if you look at the leadership in the market today, we have healthcare. They're the big leader. Energy, second. Coming off the heels of, Halliburton, Schlumberger earnings. We saw yesterday where the sector went up with oil down. Now with oil up, sectors moving on up. Utilities, consumer staples, Procter & Gamble kind of helping that out. Pepsi helping that out. Industrial, tech just kind of in the middle. Which is kind of where it's been here of late. Financials not leading here today. We have materials lagging here today along with consumer discretionary. So interesting setup. We'll see how that, we'll see how it, looks as we go into the close of the market today, which I think will be more significant. But, anyway, it is, very interesting to me to kind of see how the leadership starts to shape out now that the financials, have at least a day of a lag here with them. All right. So anyway, that's challenge. No real changes to make. Again, mornings, heck, the algorithm is, is programmed so that in the morning things are just tighter. It's a lot harder to get a signal. Occasionally we do, but it's not something that I wake up expecting. Oh, we're going to get a great signal here, here this morning. Now, yesterday, I was in a meeting. And I don't, many of you know I don't have much to do with the running of Trader Minute anymore. I've given a lot of that away, a lot of those responsibilities away, and focused on the trading and the challenge, and been a been the driving force here for that, the challenge algorithm, and still working on a few trade things, but things like the market vibe and everything else, and having the market and trading be my focus, because look, I don't have much interest in running a business and being part of and all of that. That is just a byproduct of what's done. So have some very good people, running things, and meeting, talking, and during the meeting, it was being talked about a few things, and one of the comments made was, "Well, we'll see what Micron does, and then we'll decide what's going to happen." And my ears perked up. I was kind of tuned out a little. My ears perked up, and I went, "Whoa, whoa, 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 hold on. We're going to make a business decision based on what Micron does?" So basically, if Micron surges, we're going to make one decision. If Micron drops, we're going to make another decision? How does that make any kind of sense? And it brought me back to, and I shared this in the meeting, and it just brought me back to a comment that I heard from Coach K, who is the coach of Duke University basketball, several years back, and it was a driving force in building the challenge process the way that it is right now. And I don't have the exact quote, but it was on the top of my mind because as I had an NFL football game on Sunday in the background, one of the announcers talked about it, and it was, kind of out of the blue there, but came to mind. I figured I'd address it or talk about it just a little bit here this morning. And the bottom line was, Coach K was saying, look, focus on what you can control. You can control the process, right? And he was talking about team building, right? But we can apply it to trading. Focus on the process. Let the results follow. And when it comes to trading, we can't control the results, right? I can't for the life of me go and control the result of a Micron trade. I can control all the research that went into it. I can control the entry. I can control the risk. I can control the time. I can control a lot of factors. But once I'm in the trade, do I have any control? I have none. And that's a very difficult position for a trader to be in, right? You go from this period of zero control, right? Total control. You have your charts, you have your research, you have your figures, your stats, all of that, all the information, and you have total control over whether you hit the button or not, whether you get into the trade or not. But once you get into the trade, do you have any control over anything except you hitting the button to get out? You don't, right? And it's a very, it could be a very sinking type of feeling, right? If you've ever gone to Vegas or played the roulette wheel, right? You have total control on what numbers you bet. Do you want red? Do you want black? Do you want even, odd? Do you want, a group of numbers? You have control over all of that. But once you make that decision, your control's gone. And now you're just waiting for the result. And so as a trader, in when it comes to developing the challenge algorithm, it was all about focusing on the process, right? Making sure the process is sound. Because if the process is sound, the results will follow. And there's a big difference between going and following a process and looking at one trade and making a decision based on one trade. And as traders, we can often do that. We look at one trade and we go, oh, what was the lesson there? Man, what had happened there? That thing should be blah, blah, blah. We start to derive a whole bunch of stuff out of one individual trade. And one of the things you continue to see me go back to is the process of the challenge. And I will continue to do that. And does it maximize every single trade? No. Does it mean that some trades, yep, you know what, we could have a little bit better entry or exit or something? Yeah, we could, right? We could. But is it consistent? Is it a process? Or are we focused on the results of that individual trade at that time? And it's one of those things that I've tried to take out of the challenge. The hyper focus over one stock, one thing that is happening right now that basically have no control of. The only thing I have control over is pushing the exit button, right? And we'll continue with this. It was something where we started the last challenge in a kind of an ugly time, ugly time period, right? And, the results, 16 winners, 13 losers, they weren't exactly fantastic. They were well below some of the averages that we have been seeing. But, folk continue to focus on the process, grab the result that came out of that process, and we will continue to do that. Right? And we know what the results can be, how they can, flux. We're going to have some challenges that go to 0. We're going to have some that go to 100. We're going to have some that go to 10 or 20. And you've heard me say I expect most to go between 10 and 20, right? Just with how the process is. We could change that. We could alter the process a little bit and get a few more 100Ks, but it would give us a lot more zeros, right? And so, the way we've kind of, tweaked it and put it together, is to have most in that 10 to 20K with that chance of 100K every once in a while and that chance of 0 every once in a while. We're going to continue to run with that, regardless of the result of a certain trade, right? The last trade on Microsoft, which ended with what, a $15 gain, so might as well be a loss, doesn't drive any kind of decision making going forward, right? The result of that individual trade is not something that alters the process. So one of the things Coach K kind of talked about was, way back when I listened to him, was the recruiting process and how he has this process of recruiting and building. And he doesn't go and change that recruiting process based off of the decision of one recruit. If he were to go out and change that process based off of the decision of every different recruit, what would happen, right? It'd be maddening. It'd be insanity. And one of the things that we traders will oftentimes get into is this, well, you know what? We let one trade, the last trade, drive our next decision. And then that trade will drive our next decision, and that trade will drive our next decision. And that's just kind of a period or gets into the process of insanity, that drives many traders nuts after a while. It can be fun for a little bit, right? But it is not something that is, ultra sustainable. And so bottom line, in my meeting yesterday, I basically said, look, the result of Micron has nothing to do with what should happen. A, B, C, D, E. The result of Micron has nothing to do with it, right? Just like the result of the trade after has nothing to do with it, and the result of the trade after has nothing to do with it. It's about making decisions off of the process of the challenge, and the results that are generated from that process relative to what our expectations are. And, as a trader, I wanted to kind of share that here with you. So as you go out and as you're making personal trades, as you're, going and looking at what to invest in or what to trade, right? Remember, it's a process. Trust your process. Don't let the one result, whether it be great, grand, and wonderful, right? Because let's face it, there are trades, there are investments where we go out and we make mistakes. Where if we were to do that 10 times in a row, we'd lose 8 out of 10 times. But you know what? We gained. We gained on that one time or that 2 times. And so making a decision based on that gain, what's that going to do? That's going to put us in a process that's very negative. So you trust your process. You run with your process. Don't let 1 or 2 trades here and there throw that process out, and trust that process out and have the results ultimately follow. All right. So enough about that, but felt like I should share that here this morning. Bottom line, market, not a lot of change in it here today. Few earnings, right? Market up just a little bit. Here we're not talking about a fantastic breakout. We're not talking about any kind of breakdown or anything for the Bears to really gain control of. But last thing I want to take a look at is Boeing. I was asked if I had any thoughts on Boeing, and bottom line is I don't. I've followed the story. I've watched the story. You know that after this drop back here, I commented on Boeing and I said, look, this is something that's going to take time to play out. It's something that I think ultimately plays out. It's something that I think ultimately Boeing puts behind them. But how long a process is that? How deep of a process is that? Who knows? Right, that is something that I can't predict. I'm not going to try to predict, but ultimately I'll be looking at Boeing with a buy eye, right? With a hey, is there a time period where I can step in and be a buyer? Watching the events over the last, Friday basically, and then some of yesterday, I kind of feel the same way. It's one where the incentives of the U.S. government is not to destroy Boeing, right? The incentives of the European government, a little bit different, right? A little bit different, let's face it. But here, U.S., the incentives are to give Boeing as many breaks as possible. But that said, there are some issues, right? There are some things that have been absolutely done incorrectly, that have been absolutely wrong, and they have to be righted. Are they systemic? Are they things that are going to affect the company for 10 years to come? I don't think so. That's me personally. I don't think so. But when I look at the chart of Boeing, right? Excuse me. The chart of Boeing is very simple. Monster run, right? New U.S. president, very favorable commentary towards Boeing. Investors had to buy Boeing. Big run. Since then, big consolidation. Almost a 2-year consolidation. Yep. Did it have the overshoot? Sure. Is it having some undershoot, big chops down? Absolutely. But bottom line for me, Boeing is in this consolidation process, and it's probably not going to leave it. And so I look at Boeing the same way as I look at Netflix. Long term, I'm bullish on Boeing, right? Doesn't mean I'm chasing it. Doesn't mean I'm buying it every single day. But, like a Netflix. Pulls on back enough, gives me a nice little buy opportunity, I start to get interested, right? I looked at Netflix yesterday. Couldn't pull the trigger. I'll look at it this afternoon. I probably won't pull the trigger. For me, I want to see it down in that 260 area, or at least be able to sell puts that give me a buy basis of 250. And not quite there yet. But just kind of that same thing. And so, from a short-term standpoint, fine, you can apply different stuff to Boeing, and what's it going to do tomorrow, who knows. But, from a longer-term standpoint, yeah, I'm interested in being a buyer, but I do want to see a little bit of price stability come in before I do buy. Can you buy it here today, put a stop on today's low, and go? Yeah. And the options are expensive, earnings, all of that. You're dealing with a lot when it comes to Boeing. But from an investment side, I'd still love to see this thing dip slightly below 300 and get an opportunity under 300. I don't know if I will, get that opportunity. But, the way things are kind of playing out, I think it's a decent chance. So I'm more willing to wait and be patient for that. All right. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a fantastic day. I'll be back on with you here this afternoon, and we'll talk to you then. Take care.